What is a daily practice that you would suggest to business leaders that you do yourself that you feel is one of the most anchoring practices in your life that has helped you transition your creativity into being something that is easy to apply for change, whether that be for somebody in their personal life or in their business?
I've had different practices over the years, whether they were musical practices or spiritual practices that have informed the work I do. But I never have a daily practice for long. I would, however, recommend a few different practices for people who are wanting to, if they're like me, try one on for a week, and see how it feels, and see if it feels good for a week, then try it for 2. See if there are any long-term effects in your interpersonal relationships, or in your work effort, or your ability to be attentive, or your ability to keep yourself accountable. You're looking for something that moves the needle, right? So if any of these practices work for them, great. One I can think of is, I do have a relatively morning routine where I do, and now that I'm in Asheville and I've got this beautiful balcony and it's overlooking the forest and the mountains, it's just like, it's so much easier to do than when I was in Florida and everything was so flat and hard and sandy. But in Asheville, going out on the balcony and just connecting with the earth and the planet and the beings around me, right? Like just kind of centering in the morning has been really enlivening. And that, I think, is important. So we'll start there with either a daily grounding, or whether it's yoga or meditation or prayer or whatever that is, whether it's journaling or a moment of silence, but something that just kind of connects, the center of you to everything else, right? Some kind of practice that does that for you would be good to try. Second thing I would recommend would be, it would be in my coaching sessions. I find myself, I have found myself having to ask a question that most coaches find unanswerable. And it's a question that comes from the book, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier. And it's the question, how can I help? It's a little bit counterintuitive, because especially if you're doing some kind of remote call, or if you're not right there with someone, or if it's, if you're their manager, or, well, they're supposed to be helping me. What is that, right? Like that, there can be any number of obstacles to asking the question, how can I help? But in any situation, especially when we're trying to engender or grow a coaching culture within an organization, this one's really important, especially with people who are kind of downline or downstream. How can I help really pushes that onus back on the recipient or the client in a way that has them thinking about solutions and how they can get the tools in the hands of other people to help them solve the problem. Well, we could do this, right? And then the aha is, yeah, it's not all on me to fix it, right? So whether it's you having to take time out of your day to actually help this person is really beside the point. It's getting them thinking about how to decentralize problem solving within themselves, not from intrapersonally to interpersonally. So I love the question, how can I help? And for most managers and leaders, like, they got enough shit on their plate. They don't have time in the day. They're not about to ask how they can help clear obstacles for people, but they've got to. They've got to stop and take a breath and ask their team members how they can help. It's one of the most transformative coaching questions I've found. Um, what other practices? What other
I,
practices?
I might pause you just for a minute there to really
Yeah.
ground in and hone in on that and take a
Yeah.
moment, take a pause, because that is a question that I started using a couple weeks ago when another coach friend of mine offered it to me.
Mhm.
And just started a dialogue with him. And at the end of it, he said, um, how can I help support you today? And it was like, it
Mhm.
was like all the birds fell silent,
Mhm.
all the, the trees stopped waving, the wind stopped. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is such a powerful question to ask. And not only in our business relationships, but also just in our interpersonal relationships, because there are a couple hard truths to our success. And one of them is our network, and we have to be engaging in our network, right? And our network is the people that we met the day that we were born, all the way up to who served us coffee yesterday morning. And when we are of service, the more we are engaging and interacting with other people, the more people are inclined to support us, right? And the more we have the
Mhm.
opportunities to help, to be of service, where it comes so much more naturally than actually, and the creative process becomes, I think, a little bit more smooth, as opposed to making it this clinical or hard spreadsheet kind of facilitation, where it's actually more effortless and there's a lot more organic flow that takes place. So thank you for sharing that, because I agree 100%. And it's also something that I think is also foundationally rooted in, if we can go off on that for a second, is in our spiritual practices and in our spiritual teachings, right? Of, dear Lord, use me, dear universe, use me.
Mm.
How can
Yeah.
I be of service today? What can I allow to come through me that is going to impact the world in some positive
Right.
way? So thank you for sharing that. I cannot agree with you more. And it is a
Yeah.
practice. It should be something that should be initiated all day, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. The last one I can think of would be listening. Would be to just get better at listening, not, and like the trope is that, not be listening, for your chance to speak or respond, but just really deeply listening. If people are curious about this, they can look into things like theory U. That's the letter U. They could talk about the 4 levels of listening, deep listening. They could maybe research the topic of reflective listening and reframing. But I think becoming a better listener is really important for leaders. And, it helps with, it just helps with being the ruler. If you're in charge, you're the king or the queen. And kings, queens consult, with their team before they decide. A king or a queen that decides before they consult is a tyrant. So consulting with your stakeholders and your team before making your decision is important, and listening has to be a part of your practice. And then decide, then do the thing, but listen first, right? So all of these things, the from listening um, to the coaching questions, to the grounding and connecting. I mean, all of these things for me, not daily practices, but practices that I sometimes do daily.
Mhm. Well, flexibility and flow in that too, right? Is
Yeah.
also what I heard, because you had mentioned there are some things that, you were the type of person that if something doesn't feel right, or you mature out of it or grow out of it, it might come back. It might be gone forever, but you give it a try. So
Mhm.
there's kind of like that flow of consistency along with flexibility, showing up for yourself to at least try on a new practice to see
Mhm.
what the fruit of that labor might potentially be. But it doesn't mean that it has to be a standard now for the next 50 years of your life. So I really like that. Um, so thank you so much, Joran. This was awesome. I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate you. Thanks for asking me to do this.
My pleasure.